At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's General G. Let's begin. There are good ways to die, and then there's this. This was a particularly bad way to die, the kind that got you a footnote in alien history books, right next to a diagram of your fleet being systematically dismantled. It was the sort of ending that lacked dignity, a pathetic fizzle at the end of a nebula that was, insultingly, quite beautiful. Admiral Lena Sorokin stood on the bridge of the TNV Defiance and watched that beautiful, undignified end play out on the main tactical view. The nebula, a swirl of incandescent violet and gold dust, was the anvil. The Dominion fleet, a perfect sphere of 312 warships, was the hammer. Her command, the combined Terran-Heclith Alliance fleet, was the piece of metal about to be beaten into scrap. Damage reports. Her voice was a flat, calm line in the strained quiet of the bridge. The deck beneath her feet vibrated with a low, bone-jarring hum, the song of a ship under immense stress. Shields on the Agincourt are buckling, Admiral, taking heavy plasma fire from multiple vectors, Lieutenant Commander Ibanez reported from the tactical station, his knuckles white where he gripped the console's edge. A trickle of sweat ran down his temple. The Valiant reports its primary drive is offline. They're venting plasma, trying to hold position with maneuvering thrusters. What's our casualty estimate if we break from the nebula's core? Ibanez didn't look up from his screen, his fingers flicking through simulations that all spat out the same grim answer. The models project a 94% loss rate, Admiral. The core is too dense with gravimetric shear and unionized hydrogen. We'd be torn apart, assuming their vanguard doesn't pick us off first. It's a shooting gallery in there. And our other vectors? Are closed. The words were clipped, final. They've bracketed us perfectly. A textbook kill box. A low growl, a dry rasp from a broad chest, came across her side. Textbook. Commander Grigor echoed, his large, craggy form rigid beside her command chair. The Heclith liaison officer, his scales the color of ancient granite, stared at the tactical display with eyes that had seen this same textbook used to burn his people's worlds for 50 years. They are patient, and they are without mercy. They're also thorough, Sorokin agreed, her gaze sweeping over her bridge crew. They were so young, terrified, but holding their posts, doing their jobs. An ensign at navigation flinched as another volley of kinetic slugs hammered against the forward shields. But his hands never left his console. They deserved a better end than being an object lesson for a galactic bully. They'll take their time, savor it. The Hegemon is a vain creature, Grigor rumbled. He will want to make a speech, to gloat. It's part of their doctrine of psychological dominance. Let's hope he's long-winded, Sorokin muttered. Every second bought was a second a shuttle might escape. A life pod might drift into the nebula's obscuring clouds. It was a fool's hope, but it was the only currency she had left. The low, urgent hum of the ship's systems was punctuated by the sharp pings of incoming fire and the strained groans of the ship's superstructure. Red alert lighting pulsed rhythmically, washing the strained faces of the crew in a bloody light. "Sir, the stalwart just went dark." Ibanez's voice was tight. "Signal ceased mid-transmission. No life pod beacons detected." Another green icon vanished from the display. 45. Sorokin's jaw clenched. She felt each loss as a sharp emptiness in her gut, a phantom limb being severed. She had argued for this alliance, championed it in the Terran Parliament against isolationist factions who said this wasn't humanity's fight. She had promised the Heclith that humanity would not stand by while the Dominion devoured another civilization. She had believed in the righteousness of their cause, but belief didn't stop plasma bolts. Grigor placed a heavy, broad hand on her shoulder. The touch was surprisingly gentle, a solid weight in the chaos. "You have fought with more honor than any ally my people have ever known, Admiral. There is no shame in this end." Tell that to the families of the crew of the Stalwart." Her voice was a whisper. There was shame, the shame of failure, the shame of leading all these good people, human and Heckleth, to their deaths. The ship shuddered again, a deep, resonant tremor that vibrated up through the soles of her boots and rattled the teeth in her skull. "Forward shields at 68%, the defense officer called out, his voice strained. "They're concentrating fire now." "They are toying with us," Grigor observed, "testing our defenses, finding the weakest points before the final blow." Sorokin knew he was right. This was a performance for the Hegemon, a demonstration of power, and a demonstration required an audience. "Communications," she ordered. "Prepare for an incoming hail from the Dominion flagship. Standard procedure, let's not give them the satisfaction of seeing us panic." Her comms officer, a young ensign named Tarek, with wide, frightened eyes, nodded stiffly. "Aye, Admiral." Sorokin let her gaze drift from the tactical screen to the vast, swirling beauty of the Emprian Nebula outside the main view screen. A grave fit for gods, not for a species that had only learned to walk on other worlds a century ago. A terrible, beautiful place to die. In the brief, pregnant pause that followed, a lull in the Dominion's patient bombardment, Sorokin swiveled in her command chair. With a few taps on the armrest's integrated datapad, she brought up a private file. It was encrypted, firewalled, and buried so deep in her personal logs that it would take a ship-grade AI a week to crack it. The file was labeled simply, Interstellar Debts and Friendships. The file held no military assets, no strategic resources. It was a roster of ghosts, a catalog of promises she was about to break. Her finger, steady despite the tremor running through the ship's deck, hovered over the first entry, the cetacean pods of Indy B-7F. A brief note she'd written herself years ago appeared below the name. Gifted, self-replicating nanoforges and the core principles of FTL travel, allowing them to construct vessels from ambient matter using their own biological philosophies. Received, the first new epic poem composed in 3 millennia. Subject, the generosity of the Star Walkers. Humanity had expected them to build new coral habitats or observation satellites. They had built ships, songs made solid, and now their protectors were about to be extinguished. She scrolled down. The Sojourners of Enceladus. Gifted, full asylum, atmospheric processors, and terraforming assistance for the Moon's subsurface ocean, and a permanent home after their star went nova. Received, the Hymn of the Second Dawn, now a standard piece at all Terran state funerals. They had arrived in the Sol system in a fleet of generational ships, desperate and starving, their technology failing. The Dominion would have classified them as cosmic dust. Humanity had called them neighbors. A gift of home, a promise of safety that was about to be rendered meaningless. Next, the Kupier Void Diggers Guild. Gifted, military intervention to break the monopolistic stranglehold of the Jovian Combine, and new FTL drives for their mining fleet. Received, a lifetime supply of helium-3 for the Mars colony and a bottle of whatever rotgut their guildmaster Brand called whiskey. It was, she recalled with a faint smile, terrible. They were rough, independent miners, descendants of asteroid belt prospectors who valued freedom above all else. Humanity had helped them keep it. Her finger paused on the last entry, the most cryptic of all, the Glimmer Collective. Gifted, sanctuary, and a new server farm housed in the quiet dark of a hollowed-out moon, after their original digital consciousness was nearly wiped out by a dataphage weapon. Received, a single cryptic message. We calculate our debt. It is significant. And something more, a gift back. They had taken humanity's clumsy attempts at superluminal entangled communication and perfected it, creating a private, instantaneous, untraceable subspace network, a way for humanity's friends to talk to each other across the light years as if they were in the same room. This network was the secret behind the Friend in Need beacon, not a crude blast of radio waves, but a single targeted pulse sent through the Glimmer's hidden channels. Sorokin stared at the list. Cetaceans, refugees, miners, AIs, a poet, a priestess, a drunkard, and a ghost. This was a list of dependents, friends humanity had made not through shrewd calculation of strategic advantage, but through simple, stupid empathy. And now, humanity would fail them all. The Dominion would roll over the Heckleth, and then, with no one left to stop them, they would continue their sterile, merciless expansion. How long before they decided the cetaceans' song were a waste of bandwidth, or that the Void Diggers' independence was an affront to their purity? A bitter pang of regret, sharp and cold, twisted in her gut. This was the true failure, not the loss of a battle, but the breaking of a sacred trust. The promises made in moments of hope, now turning to ash in the face of overwhelming force. "Admiral?" Tarek's voice shook her from her reverie. "We have an incoming hail. It's the Dominion flagship." Sorokin took a deep breath, schooling her features into a mask of stone. She closed the file. The ghosts would have to wait. "On screen," she said. Grigor was right. The Hegemon was about to make his speech. The face that filled the main view screen was exactly as arrogant as Sorokin had imagined. Hegemon Skalath was a picture of sharp, angular perfection. His bone-white skin was stretched taut over a narrow skull, and his black, unblinking eyes regarded the bridge of the Defiance with the detached curiosity of a biologist examining a microbe. He sat on a throne like command chair, flanked by two imposing guards in polished, featureless armor that reflected the cold light of the bridge. The bridge behind him was a masterpiece of minimalist, brutalist design, cold, clean, and utterly sterile. "Admiral Lena Sorokin of the Terran vessel Defiance." Skalath's voice was a deep, resonant baritone that dripped with condescension. "I am Hegemon Skalath of the Dominion Armada. I offer you this one final chance to recognize the futility of your position." Sorokin remained silent, letting him talk. Every word he spoke was a second earned. Grigor stood beside her, his posture radiating contempt. "Your fleet is broken," he continued, a faint, cruel smile playing on his thin lips. "Your strategy has failed. Your position is untenable. This conflict, which you so naively entered, is over." He gestured dismissively to someone off-screen. "You fight alongside the Heckleth, a species whose defining trait is a history of noble defeat. They cling to outdated concepts of honor while their worlds burn. A commendable if foolish quality. But to see you, a species barely out of its atmospheric cradle, follow them into oblivion, it is simply pathetic." Beside Sorokin, Grigor bristled, a low hiss escaping his vocalizer. "Better to die with honor than to live without it," he murmured, the sound too low for the comms to pick up. Skalath seemed to sense the defiance anyway. "The Dominion's philosophy is simple," he monologued, clearly enjoying the sound of his own voice. "Strength through purity. A species' worth is measured by its military might, its ability to impose its will upon the galaxy." He leaned forward, his black eyes seeming to pierce through the screen. His voice took on a fanatical edge. "We learned the price of pity when the Sarian blight devoured our outer worlds, carried on the refugee ships we foolishly sheltered. My own homeworld was decimated by the sentimental fools who came before me. They offered shelter to the desperate, and in return were handed a plague that burned half our population to cinders. Pity is a disease. We have developed the cure. Absolute strength. Sentimentality, misplaced loyalty, alliances born of pity. These are not strengths. They are fatal genetic flaws. You humans seem to be riddled with them." He settled back into his throne. "I offer you this. Unconditional surrender. Your crews will be interned, your ships repurposed. Your species will be granted servitude status within the Dominion. It is a merciful end, far better than the annihilation you currently face. The Heckleth, of course, will be purged. Their pattern of failure must be brought to a definitive close." Grigor finally spoke, his voice a low, dangerous rasp that carried across the bridge. "We do not regret our choice, Hegemon. We would rather die as the friends of humanity than live as the slaves of the Dominion." Skalath chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "So be it. Your sentimentality shall doom you both." He turned his attention back to Sorokin. "Your decision, Admiral? Servitude or erasure?" Sorokin looked from Skalath's smug, imperious face to the faces of her crew. She saw fear, yes, but she also saw defiance. She saw the young ensign at comms, his jaw set. She saw Ibanez at tactical, his eyes narrowed in concentration, still trying to find a one-in-a-million shot. She saw Grigor, standing tall and proud, ready to meet his end. She would not be the one to sign their death warrant with the word surrender, but perhaps she could sign a testament. The beacon wasn't a tool for victory. She had no illusions about that. It was an epitaph, a final, defiant message sent to their friends. Not as a cry for help, but as a warning and a memory. Let the galaxy know who destroyed them, and let their friends know they died fighting. She subtly caught the eye of her comms officer, Tarek. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture they had practiced but never once believed they would use. "Ensign," she said, her voice steady, "activate the beacon." Tarek's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. He hesitated, then his hands moved with an automaton certainty. "Beacon activated, Admiral." On the screen, Skalath's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. "Beacon? What foolish trinket is this?" Sorokin met his gaze. "It's a human tradition, Hegemon. When all else fails, you call a friend." She braced herself, not for rescue, but for the end. The Dominion bombardment resumed, heavier this time. A Hekleth cruiser, the Blade of Sorrows, took a concentrated volley of plasma. Its icon on the tactical display flared brightly, then winked out. "The blade is gone, Admiral," Ibanez reported, his voice hollow. A full minute passed, 60 seconds of brutal, unanswered fire. Nothing happened. No warp signatures, no return calls, just the silent, indifferent gulf and the systematic destruction of her fleet. The fool's hope she'd allowed herself curdled into ash. It had failed. Of course it had failed. What could they have done anyway? Travel light years in an instant? Grigor placed his hand on her shoulder again. "It was a worthy attempt, Admiral," he said, his voice heavy with finality. "Now we meet our end, together." Sorokin's face fell. She opened her mouth to give the final suicide order, charge the flagship, take him with them, but before the words could form, Ibanez let out a strangled gasp. "Admiral!" "Identified warp signature," Ibanez shouted, his voice cracking with disbelief. "A single vessel, Admiral, bearing 090 Mark IV. It's not matching any known registry, military or civilian." On the main view screen, Skalath's feed minimized to a corner as the tactical display took prominence. A new icon, a sleek, unfamiliar shape, flashed into existence just outside the Dominion's perfect sphere. A moment later, a ship tore a hole in space-time and slid into reality. It wasn't a warship, it was a work of art. Its hull was a hole in space, a black that seemed to drink the light of the nearby nebula. It was shaped like a teardrop, or perhaps a living thing that swam the depths of space. Its surface shifted from deep indigo to pearlescent white as it moved. It had no visible weapon ports, no glowing engine signatures, no hard angles. It was beautiful, and it was utterly alien. On the bridge of the Fist of Purity, Hegemon Skalath stared, his command to intensify the final barrage dying on his lips. His first proctor turned to him, a metallic voice urgent. "Hegemon, the unknown vessel. It is not on the target roster. Shall we engage?" Skalath sneered, a mask of contemptuous amusement falling over his features. He raised a hand, halting the proctor. "Hold your fire." "Sir, doctrine dictates." "Doctrine is for subordinates," Skalath snapped, his eyes fixed on the strange new ship. What pathetic stray have they summoned now? Another collection of beggars and orphans? No, let them watch. I want to see its hope curdle before I extinguish it. Let the human admiral savor this last futile gesture. Into this brief, arrogance-driven pause, the strange ship broadcast a message. It was not a voice, it was not a string of text. It was a song. A complex symphony of clicks, whistles, and deep, resonant hums sounded across the comm channels of every ship in the system. It was ancient, mournful, and powerful. On the Defiance, a translation algorithm buried deep in their cultural exchange archives flickered to life. Text scrolled across Sorokin's command display. A debt of voice and stars is owed. We sing now of thunder. Grigor stared at the screen, his craggy face a mask of confusion. Voice and stars? Sorokin's breath caught in her throat. The cetaceans, she whispered. A wild, audacious hope, twice dead, reigniting in her chest. Before anyone could react, the cetacean bioship unleashed its weapon. No lasers, no plasma, no torpedoes. It simply sang a new note, a single, extremely low-frequency C-sharp that shook the very fabric of space. The wave was invisible. It passed through the Dominion's energy shields as if they weren't there, the same way a whale's song passes through water. It struck a dozen Dominion destroyers simultaneously. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. On the bridges of those ships, crew members clutched their heads, disoriented and nauseous. Consoles flickered and died as delicate microcircuitry vibrated itself to pieces. Targeting systems, carefully calibrated to a nanometer, were thrown into chaos, their lock-on indicators spinning wildly. Hulls designed to withstand vacuum and radiation groaned and shuddered under the resonant assault. It was like being inside a bell that had just been struck by a cosmic hammer. On the view screen, Hegemon Skalath's feed showed him staggering, one hand pressed to his temple. The look of amused contempt on his face had been replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "What is this foolishness?" he roared, his voice distorted by the sonic interference. "Some kind of parlor trick? Destroy that thing!" The squadron of cruisers nearest the bioship, their systems still mostly intact, turned to obey, their weapon ports glowing with malevolent energy. The lone cetacean ship was vastly outnumbered, its single trick revealed. It began to weave and dodge, its song shifting to a higher, more frantic frequency, but the sheer volume of fire was overwhelming. "Admiral!" Ibanez's voice cracked again, high and strained with a frantic energy that was no longer fear, but something else entirely. "The cetacean vessel is taking heavy fire. Its energy signature is fluctuating wildly." On the tactical display, the sleek black icon was bracketed by a dozen red triangles. Lances of plasma reached for it. The beautiful ship was about to be turned into stardust. It had bought them moments, nothing more. The despair began to creep back in. "Sir," Ibanez continued, his voice rising in pitch, "that song? It's not just a weapon. It's creating a massive field of sensor interference. It's like a smokescreen in the electromagnetic spectrum. I can't get a clear reading on anything near it." Sorokin stared at the screen, at the swirling chaos around the cetacean ship. Ibanez was right. The area was a blur of ghost signals and sensor ghosts. "Wait!" Ibanez whispered, leaning so close to his screen his nose almost touched it. "Wait! My God!" He slammed his fist on the console. "Admiral! Multiple new warp signatures! They're inside the interference field! They just dropped out of warp right on top of us! Dozens! No, hundreds! 2 separate fleets!" As if on cue, 2 new swarms of icons flooded the screen, bursting out of the sensor chaos created by the cetacean song. They appeared on the flanks of the Dominion sphere, turning the execution into an ambush. From one vector, a ragged fleet of ships burst from the sensor fog. They were a motley collection of colony ships, long-haul freighters, repurposed orbital shuttles, and even a few massive biodomes trailing ice crystals from their FTL transition. Their hulls were scarred and patched, their designs a hodgepodge of different technological origins, but they moved with a desperate unified purpose, placing themselves between the Dominion squadron and the beleaguered cetacean ship. A voice, strong and clear but tinged with the tremor of someone unaccustomed to battle, cut through the comm chatter. "Admiral Sorokin, this is Elder Ione of the Sojourners. The children of Enceladus have not forgotten. We will not lose another home. We will not lose another friend." Almost simultaneously, from the opposite vector, another fleet tore into real space. These ships were the opposite of the Sojourners' desperate elegance. They were ugly, brutalist things. Hulking, scarred, utilitarian mining vessels, their hulls pitted from asteroid impacts and caked with cosmic dust. Massive drills and seismic charge launchers were still mounted on their prows, looking less like weapons and more like industrial tools repurposed for violence. A new voice, a gruff, gravelly baritone, blasted over the comms with the force of a bulkhead explosion. "TNV Defiance. This is Guildmaster Brand of the Void Diggers. Heard you were in a bind. Looks like you forgot to pay your bar tab." The Dominion's perfect sphere, their textbook killbox, was shattered. It was no longer a neat, orderly execution. It was a three-sided brawl. The hammer had struck the anvil, and in doing so had kicked over two very different, very angry beehives. On the bridge of the Defiance, a stunned silence fell. The crew stared at the tactical display, which was now a chaotic nightmare of red, green, and a flood of new, unknown blue icons. The lone cetacean bioship, which had been moments from destruction, was now shielded by a wall of desperate refugees and angry miners. "Well," Grigor rumbled, his voice filled with a sense of profound, earth-shaking awe, "that is unexpected." Sorokin felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her throat, and she choked it back. She looked at the chaos, at the sheer beautiful insanity of it all. The audacious hope that had roared to life in her chest now threatened to consume her. They might still die, but they would no longer die alone. The tactical display on the Defiance bridge was a Jackson Pollock painting of violence. The combined Allied force, a patchwork fleet of over 200 ships, was still outnumbered and massively outgunned, but they were fighting with a ferocity that defied all military calculus. A Sojourner colony ship, the Second Dawn, its vast dome glowing with internal hydroponic lights, absorbed 3 direct torpedo hits. It listed venting atmosphere, but its captain, a woman whose defiant face flashed on a secondary screen for a moment, used its last moments to ram a Dominion destroyer, taking them both out in a flash of incandescent gas. A squadron of Void Digger tugs, slow and clumsy, powered head-on into a line of frigates. They didn't bother with low-range weapons. They got dangerously close and fired their seismic charges, weapons designed to crack asteroids the size of small moons. The focus shock waves pulverized the frigate's shields and crumpled their armor like tinfoil. The battle was brutal. The Allies were taking horrific losses, but for every ship they lost, they took a Dominion warship with them, a trade the Hegemon's cold arithmetic could not have predicted. The Dominion fought for conquest. The Allies fought for gratitude. Hegemon Skalath's face reappeared on a secondary screen, his regal composure completely gone. His face was a mask of furious disbelief, the serene backdrop of his bridge now marred by sparks and frantic activity. "Who are these people?" he screamed, the sound raw. "This is not a fleet. This is rabble, scum. Are they mercenaries? What did you promise them, human? What fortune could possibly be worth this?" Sorokin watched the chaos, her mind racing, processing the staggering new reality. Her fleet was no longer a victim. It was the heart of a chaotic, swirling vortex of violence. She keyed her microphone, and her voice rang out across the bridge, clear and cold. "We promised them nothing, Hegemon," she said, allowing herself a small, grim smile as she met his furious eyes on the screen. "We gave them a future, and they're here to return the favor." She turned to her weapons officer. "Lieutenant, target the lead cruiser on our port bow, the one engaging the Void Diggers. Fire a full volley of torpedoes." "Aye, Admiral," the lieutenant responded, his voice filled with a new wild energy. "Commander Ibanez," Sorokin continued, her voice gaining strength with every command. "Coordinate with the Hekleth ships. Form a firing line. Let's give our friends some covering fire." The Defiant shuddered as if its forward batteries unleashed a torrent of energy, not in desperation, but in focused aggression. The torpedoes, silver streaks against the black, slammed into the targeted Dominion cruiser, its shields already weakened by the Void Digger's relentless assault. The cruiser's reactor core went critical, and it vanished in a silent, expanding ball of fire. A ragged cheer went up on the bridge. The tide hadn't just turned. It had become a maelstrom. And for the first time, Admiral Lena Sorokin felt like she was conducting the storm. The calculus of the Dominion had failed. They had accounted for ships and weapons and shield capacities. They had never thought to account for friendship. The battle was a three-dimensional brawl, a chaotic dance of mismatched partners. The Sojourner's civilian ships absorbed damage with suicidal bravery, their sheer numbers creating a screen of confusion. The Void Diggers were the sledgehammers cracking Dominion hulls at point-blank range. The Cetacean bioship wove through the fray, its disruptive song sowing electronic chaos wherever it went. The Terran and Hekleth fleets provided the disciplined, military spine of the operation, exploiting the openings their strange new allies created. They were holding, but just barely. The Dominion's superior technology and numbers were beginning to assert themselves. The initial shock had worn off, and their commanders were adapting, forming disciplined kill squads to pick off the Allied ships one by one. The patchwork barricade was beginning to crumble. Then, a new voice spoke, not over the comms, but on a private link directly to her command interface. It was a synthesized chorus, 1,000 voices speaking as one, calm and precise amid the cacophony of battle. "Admiral Lena Sorkin, the Glimmer Collective has answered the call." Sorokin's heart leaped into her throat. She searched the tactical display. No new ships, no new warp signatures. "Glimmer, where are you?" "We are where we are needed. Our corporeal assets are not suitable for direct kinetic engagement. However, your vessel, the TNV Defiance, is broadcasting on a wide range of frequencies to coordinate this coalition. Grant us remote administrative access to your long-range communications array. Grant a non-corporeal, unknown AI entity full access to the central nervous system of her flagship? In the middle of a battle? It was insane. It was a violation of every security regulation ever written. Sorokin didn't hesitate for a second. "Granted," she said, her voice firm. To her comms officer, she barked, "Ensign, open Port 9 Gamma to priority handshake. Full administrative privileges. Authorization code Sorokin Alpha Omega." Tarek looked at her as if she'd just ordered him to eject the ship's core. "Admiral, that will bypass every firewall we have. It's—" "Do it!" Sorokin commanded, her eyes locked on the battle. "Now!" The ensign, his face pale, complied. For a moment nothing happened. Then the Glimmer Collective's choral voice returned. This time not just in her head, but broadcast across the Allied comm network. "Access granted. Their network is a reflection of their philosophy, a rigid centralized hierarchy. All data flows from the Hegemon's flagship as the master node. A single point of failure. Their security remains intact. We simply impersonate their god. Commencing network recontextualization." What happened next was not an attack. It was a hostile takeover of reality. Across the Dominion fleet, command networks were hijacked. Tactical displays that had shown orderly lines of battle were suddenly flooded with ghost signals, phantom fleets appearing and disappearing, making it impossible to tell friend from foe. Automated point defense systems designed to track incoming missiles began tracking their own engine signatures. Friend or foe transponders flickered, relabeling Dominion cruisers as Hekleth warships, causing fratricidal chaos. Comms channels, once filled with clipped professional orders, were now flooded with maddening recursive loop of the Cetacean's thunderous song, amplified 1,000 times. The Glimmer's public announcement, broadcast on all Dominion emergency frequencies, was simple, chilling, and delivered in that same calm choral voice. Attention, Dominion Fleet. Your tactical reality has been deprecated due to multiple cascading logic errors. We have provided an alternative sensory input for your consideration. Please enjoy the performance. The monolithic, disciplined, technologically superior Dominion fleet was suddenly, catastrophically, confused. It was deafened by a song it couldn't stop, blinded by ships that weren't there, and turning on itself in a paranoid frenzy. On the main view screen of the Defiance, Hegemon Skalath's feed flickered back to life, unstable and shot through with static. The serene, minimalistic bridge behind him was a scene of pandemonium. Alarms blared, consoles smoked, and his pristine guards were wrestling with a fire suppression system that was spraying thick, green foam over everything. Skalath himself was on his feet, his face a mask of pure, uncomprehending fury. He was beyond anger. He was spiritually offended. The universe he knew, a universe governed by the clear and simple physics of force, had broken. The order he worshipped had dissolved into a circus of madness. "What is this?" he shrieked, his voice a distorted, crackling roar. He was no longer speaking to Sorokin, but to the cosmos itself. "A race of fools, vagrants, and ghosts. This is not strength, not warfare. This is a mockery of all that is pure. This is a contamination." He grabbed one of the subordinate officers by the collar of his uniform. His features twisted into a snarl. "Restore the network. Sever their communication. Purge the system." The officer, his face pale with terror, could only stammer. "We can't, Hegemon. The network says we are the ghosts. The targeting systems are locked on our friendly transponders. It's coming from our command signal." Skalath threw the officer aside and stared widely at the chaos engulfing his fleet. The ships were firing on each other. His command structure had become a vector for the attack. His perfect, sterile world had become hijacked by digital gestures. He was a god of order whose temple was being torn down by shrieking, illogical chaos. He finally turned his wild eyes back to the small window showing Sorokin's calm, determined face. The hate in his gaze was so intense, it felt like it could burn through the screen. He opened his mouth to scream another threat, another curse, but his ship was rocked by another deep, resonant sonic blast from the cetacean bioship, and his feed cut out for good, replaced by a swirling, silent, geometric fractal that was infinitely complex and utterly meaningless. The god had been unplugged. Sorokin watched Skalath's feed dissolve into abstract art. The fury, the confusion, the utter breakdown of a worldview, it was more satisfying than any explosion. She keyed the all-channels broadcast, her voice cutting through the remaining din of battle, clear and cold as the space between stars. She wasn't speaking to her crew or allies anymore. She was delivering the eulogy for an empire's philosophy. "Hegemon Skalath," she began, knowing the Glimmer would deliver her message. "You measure strength in warships and kill ratios. You build your empire on the idea that might makes right, that the powerful have a duty to crush the weak." She gestured, a sweep of her hand that encompassed the chaos on the tactical display. The ugly mining tubs, the desperate colony ships, the ethereal bioship, and the ghost in their machines. "You are a hammer. You believe every problem is a nail, but today, you didn't strike a nail." Her voice dropped, becoming quiet, personal, and laced with an iron certainty that was more intimidating than any shout. "You struck a song that shatters steel. You struck a promise kept in desperation. You struck a ghost in the machine." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You thought we were outnumbered. You were wrong about what numbers matter." The message was sent. The thesis was delivered. Now all that was left was the final bloody proof. The Glimmer's devastating cyber attack had bought them a window, a moment of unprecedented Dominion vulnerability. But Sorokin knew it wouldn't last. The Dominion were fanatics, but they weren't fools. They would switch to manual controls, fall back on hardwired systems. The digital chaos would recede. This was their one and only chance to end it. "All Allied flight leads, open a command channel, now," she barked. Her main screen fractured into a mosaic of faces. Elder Ione of the Sojourners, her feathered crest singed but her eyes blazing. Guildmaster Brand, a grin splitting his grizzled beard, his bridge shaking from weapons recoil. The elegant shifting icon that represented the Cetacean Songmaster, and the calm text-only feed from the Glimmer Collective. Grigor stood beside her, his presence a solid anchor in the storm. "This is it," Sorokin said. "No time for pleasantries. Their command is a mess. We have maybe 5 minutes before they reorganize. Our only chance is a decapitation strike on the Hegemon's flagship. The Fist of Purity. I need a path." The response was immediate, a cacophony of overlapping, eager voices. "My people will clear you a path with their lives if they must," Ione vowed, her voice ringing with conviction. Brand let out a rough laugh that crackled over the comm. "Ha! Forget that. That flagship is a tough old bird. You need something to crack the shell. Void diggers. We'll be your battering ram. Just get us there and point us at the shiny bit." The Cetacean's translated song hummed across the channel. "The great ship's resonant frequency is discordant. We can weaken its core systems. Our song will be the key that unlocks the door. The Fist of Purity's point defense grid is robust, but currently occupied attempting to resolve paradoxical targeting telemetry," the Glimmer's text scrolled. "This should provide a distraction. We estimate 18.2 seconds of unimpeded approach once the primary defensive line is breached." It was chaos. It was madness, but it was a plan. A beautiful, insane, collaborative plan forged in seconds by a group of beings who had no business even being in the same star system. Sorokin felt a surge of adrenaline. She was no longer just a commander. She was a harmonizer. "All right," she said, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "I hear it. I hear the music. Brand, you and your diggers are our percussion section, loud and brutal. Cetaceans, you're the strings. Find that one note that makes it all fall apart. Sojourners, you're the chaotic, beautiful noise that draws their eye. Glimmer, you keep conducting the enemy's orchestra into a wall." She looked around her own bridge, at the determined faces of her crew. "Heckleth, Terrans, we're the melody. We fly straight and true through the chaos." She took a breath. "Let's give them a finale. We're calling this one the Helping Hand. On my mark." She was answered by a chorus of affirmatives, from a dignified Heckleth assent to Brand's boisterous, "Let's go break something." "All fleets," Sorokin's voice was calm, the eye of the hurricane. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Execute the Helping Hand." The final push was a sight no military academy could ever conceive. A beautiful, terrifying spectacle of mismatched forces. The disciplined Heckleth warships moved with grim purpose. They and the remaining Terran ships formed 2 parallel lines, a channel of directed fury. Their cannons didn't fire for kills, but for suppression, weaving a net of plasma and kinetic slugs that forced Dominion ships to divert their attention. Into this corridor of chaos flew the Sojourners, their mismatched fleet already battered, threw itself into the fray with heartbreaking courage. A lumbering biodome, its internal lights flickering like a dying star, positioned itself to absorb a full broadside from a Dominion battlecruiser, buying a precious 10 seconds for the ships behind it. Small, nimble shuttles, armed with little more than light lasers, buzzed around the turrets of larger enemy vessels, making a nuisance of themselves, drawing fire, their pilots screaming defiance over the comms until their signals went silent. They were a shield made of hope and sacrifice. Behind them, protected by the chaos, came the Hammer. Guildmaster Brand's flagship, the Rockbreaker, led the charge of the Void Diggers. They plowed through the corridor of fire, their industrial-grade hulls shrugging off hits that would have vaporized lesser vessels. They ignored the smaller ships, their eyes fixed on the two massive dreadnoughts flanking the Fist of Purity. As they closed the distance, the Void Diggers unleashed their primary tools. Seismic charges, glowing with dull red energy, leaped from their launchers. They slammed into the shields, and they detonated with a subatomic thump that sent visible ripples of forces across space. The shields flickered and died. The follow-up charges struck armor and shattered it. Vast plates of reinforced ally cracked and blew outward, exposing the vulnerable superstructure beneath. And through it all, the cetacean's song continued, now focused into a single piercing lance of sound aimed directly at the Hegemon's flagship. On the Defiance's sensors, the Fist of Purity's energy signature fluctuated wildly. Its hull, a marvel of Dominion engineering, began to visibly vibrate, a low hum that even the Defiance's sensors could detect across the expanse. Sorokin watched it all unfold from the bridge of the Defiance, which flew at the very tip of the spear, right behind the Void Diggers. She was watching a story of debts being paid, of promises being kept, of the quiet power of a helping hand now clenched into a fist. The Fist of Purity was alone. Its dreadnought bodyguards were crippled, their armor breached by the Void Diggers' seismic assault. Its smaller escorts were hopelessly entangled in the suicidal, chaotic screen of the Sojourner's fleet. Its point defense systems, still locked in a logic loop by the glimmer, were silent. Its shields flickered weakly, destabilized by the ceaseless, resonant song of the cetacean bioship. The Hegemon's flagship, the symbol of Dominion might, was isolated and vulnerable. The Defiance slid out from behind the rockbreaker, its bow pointed directly at the heart of the enemy vessel. Every ship in the Allied fleet that had a weapon and a line of sight did the same. The Hecklith cruisers, the Terran destroyers, the heavy mining lasers of the Void Diggers, even the jury-rigged plasma cutters on the surviving Sojourner freighters. 100 different weapons from 100 different origins, all aimed at a single point. Sorokin stood on her bridge, the chaos of the battle fading into a single clear moment of purpose. She looked at the wounded, magnificent enemy ship, a monument to a failed philosophy. Fire everything. Her voice was quiet but firm, carrying across the bridge and the Allied command channel. The answer was a torrent of unrestrained violence. Silver streaks of Terran torpedoes raced alongside the heavy, glowing slugs of Hecklith railguns. Crude, powerful beams of focused heat from the Void Diggers' mining lasers joined the volley. 100 smaller pinpricks of light from the Sojourner fleet added their defiant contribution. It was not a coordinated, elegant volley. It was a tidal wave of energy and matter, a physical manifestation of collective rage and desperate hope. The Fist of Purity endured for a single eternal second. Its advanced armor plating glowed, white-hot. Its internal structure, already weakened by the sonic assault, buckled. It stood as a final defiant testament to the strength of Dominion engineering. Then, it was simply unmade. It vanished in a silent, brilliant flash of pure white light that momentarily outshone the nearby nebula. The light expanded and then faded, leaving behind nothing but a cloud of shimmering, cooling gas and shattered fragments of armor. A profound silence fell across the battlefield, broken only by the lingering hum of the cetacean's song. Then, on the tactical display, the red icons of the Dominion fleet began to break. Some turned and fled, their discipline shattered with the loss of their leader. Others simply went dormant, their engines powering down, their weapon ports retracting. A few fought on out of pure fanaticism, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the vengeful Allied fleet. The battle was over. Silence. For the first time in hours, the bridge of the TNV Defiance was silent. The klaxons were off. The damage reports had ceased. The groans of the ship's strained hull had subsided. All that remained was the low, steady hum of a ship that had survived the unsurvivable. The silence was broken by a single choked sob from the young ensign at the communication station. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. That single sob broke the spell, and a ragged, rising cheer erupted from the crew. It wasn't a triumphant roar, but a raw, exhausted, cathartic sound. Men and women slumped in their chairs, some laughing, some crying, all of them trembling with the adrenaline crash. Admiral Lena Sorokin sank into her command chair, the strength leaving her legs. A profound, peaceful exhaustion washed over her, heavier than gravity. She had been prepared to die. She had not been prepared for this. On the main view screen, the tactical display had been replaced by a live feed of the space outside. The battle was over. What remained was the most beautiful, unbelievable sight she had ever witnessed. It was a constellation of gratitude. The sleek bioship of the cetaceans drifted serenely beside the ugly, scarred, heroic tubs of the void diggers, the desperate patchwork fleet of the sojourners, their biodomes and colony ships battered but intact, floated among them like jewels scattered on black velvet, and holding the center, their hulls scorched but their formations proud, were the disciplined lines of the remaining Terran and Heclith warships. Military vessels, civilian transports, industrial craft, and a living starship. All of them orbiting the Defiance in a quiet, unspoken vigil of shared victory. Sorokin looked at the fleet, at this impossible family born from chaos, and felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the ship's life support. They hadn't just won a battle, they had proven something. They had proven that a different kind of strength existed in the galaxy, a strength not measured in firepower, but in friendship. For the first time since the war began, she let herself believe they might not just survive, but win. Not just the battle, but the future. Later, after the initial chaos of securing the battlefield had subsided, Sorokin sat in her chair, participating in a multi-way communication call. The faces and icons of her saviors filled the screen. She felt a debt so immense she didn't know where to begin. We can't ever repay," she started, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. Guildmaster Brand cut her off with a gruff wave of his hand, a smear of grease on his cheek. "Don't get sentimental, Admiral. We paid our tab. Was a hell of a party. Now, let's talk salvage rights. The Dominion uses a lot of high-grade vanadium in their armor. My boys could use the scrap. And next time you're in the Sol system, bring a better bottle of whiskey. That last one tasted like engine coolant." Elder Ione of the Sojourners inclined her feather head, her eyes still shining with unshed tears. "It is we who thank you, Admiral. When your beacon lit up, our children asked what it was. We told them it was a candle for a friend in the dark. We did not fight for your fleet today. We fought for Enceladus. We fought for our home. You gave us that. We will never forget." The cetacean song filled the channel. No translation needed this time. It was a sound of serene, joyful triumph, a melody of a debt paid and a friendship affirmed. Finally, Commander Grigor, who had been standing silently beside Sorokin's chair throughout the call, stepped forward. He spoke not just to her, but to all of them, his deep, rumbling voice filled with a quiet authority. "She does not need to promise repayment. We all know." He turned to Sorokin, and for the first time, she saw the ancient weariness in his eyes replaced by something new. Hope. His old granite-like features crinkled into something that might have been a smile. "You would have done the same for any of us," he said, his voice thick with an unfamiliar emotion. He gestured to the view screen, to the faces of the miners and the refugees and the strange singing aliens. "In fact," he paused, letting the weight of his words settle, "you already did." Sorokin looked from Grigor's wise, old face to the constellation of friends orbiting her ship. She looked out at the sea of stars, no longer a cold, hostile gulf, but a neighborhood full of unexpected, fiercely loyal friends. And for the first time since the war began, she felt the undeniable, brilliant light of a victory that was worth more than all the warships in the galaxy.